Chapter 4. Respecting a father figure. Man, the first fruit. Genesis 1 and 2 says God began creating the earth, heaven, and animals. Then God created a man of his image and named him Adam. Then he created a woman of man's rib, named her Eve, and put her in the Garden of Eden, all of which was in Africa. In Genesis 17:4, as a descendant of Adam, God said to Abraham, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations." In Genesis 22:1-14 it says, because of things God did, Abraham was tempted to take his only son, Isaac, to the land of Moriah for a burnt offering. There they built an altar to worship the Lord, and Isaac was the lamb unto God. And when Abraham started to slay his son, an angel appeared and said not to lay a hand on the son. Festival of First Fruits. The 15th of Nisan begins Hag HaMatzah, the feast of unleavened bread, which is a high Sabbath, a Shabbaton. Leviticus 23:10-11, and it is a 7-day feast to the Lord. The day following the Sabbath during Passover is called the Feast of First Fruits. Israel's firstborn of both beast and man were sanctified, made heavenly, and presented unto the Lord. The lands that God had given them as an inheritance, he took first fruits at the altar. They were to keep a feast 3 times a year of unleavened bread, and 3 times a year the males would appear before the Lord. And thereafter, they all would fall on their knees to worship the Lord and rejoice for all the things he had given them. Festival ceremonies observance was carried out systematically. When standing ripe harvest of barley and wheat was ready to reap, a celebrant would take 1 sheaf of standing harvest and bring it to the priest. The lone sheaf was called the sheaf of the first fruits. The priest would then take the sheaf and wave it before the Lord in his house. This was to be done the day after Sabbath. The priest would wave the sheaf to be accepted upon the firstborn's behalf. Prescribed offerings were also presented, and many other things on earth were presented before the Lord as first fruits. In both Exodus and Numbers, God spoke to Moses about what to tell the children of Israel once they received land. He said when they started to reap the harvest, they were to bring a sheaf of first fruits to the priest. The children were an example of how God harvests people for eternal life in his kingdom, since he only wanted labor of first fruits from lands of the inheritances they possessed. The blood and fat of their sacrifices he didn't want, and it was to remain until morning. Festival of First Fruits, Resurrection and Salvation. The theme of this festival of first fruits was resurrection and salvation. On this day, saints rise out of graves where they sleep. Though Al-Hakim Allah ascended on high, he continually gives gifts to those who rise from the dead, to become the first fruit of those who are asleep. You normally seek first the kingdom of God. Since the beginning of time, God has followed a systematic plan that is symbolized by his holy days. He offers all humanity eternal life with resurrection and salvation in his kingdom. This is how the Spirit of the Father saves and works throughout your life. And that is if you allow him. An example of harvesting in Leviticus 26:3-5, God promised blessings over Israel if they met 3 certain conditions. He said their lands would increase, increasing workflow between seasons of sowing, threshing, and vintage. And he would protect them from their enemies. The conditions were: 1. Walk in my statutes. 2. Keep my commandments. 3. Do them. During the sowing season, they scatter seeds throughout the field for propagation. Harvest begins in spring between February and March, and stages continue into autumn. The Passover is celebrated in March and April between the 14th and 21st. During the threshing season, the harvest is ready to be reaped. Remarkably, they either picked or pulled the harvest by the roots, while the grains were beaten out with a stick. Vintage begins between August and September, and during the vintage season, they gather vine crops to produce wine. The agricultural year begins in autumn with plowing and sowing. And sowing season in Israel starts in October and lasts until the end of February. Back then, bathing and eating late were reasons to hold resentment toward parents. Natural foods were of free abundance, and people believed a harvest flowed like milk and honey. Since the feast was prepared after harvest was brought to the altar, a fruitful person was an owner or worker in a garden. Bible study and prayer were done in secret, and no one believed the Bible was propaganda or the gospel was watered down. People believed if their thoughts were in vain that they would suffer a consequence. The poor were tortured for taking a stand against local authorities, and they were oppressed. People didn't quarrel about things that wouldn't get them ahead in life. Nowadays, driddles believe there are no prophecies, and human beings are incapable of being godly. Very few people replace processed foods for a harvest and won't visit a church unless you tell them a feast will be prepared. This explains why many people confuse the work of God's ministry as enemy warfare when processed foods bring out the cowardice in mankind. All this to say, a harvest brings people together whether it is the holidays or not, and a bigger harvest is always needed. For more information on communion with God and first fruits, read Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers 28, 29, 20, 31. Understanding the Spirit of God through Kings. Hezekiah, Ezekias, was a leader who formed the one God belief for a greater impact, and for this reason, he believed it wasn't necessary to worship other idols or kings. Al-Hakim Allah was born to be a living sacrifice as a king for mankind. Both David and Al-Hakim Allah had exhibited godly characters more so than their prior generation. Al-Hakim Allah saved his people while living, otherwise, they would have continually walked in darkness while dwelling in the shadows of death. The people from Cairo to Israel had become disobedient by multiplying nations without increasing joy according to the harvest. God's ministry helped increase government, judgment, and justice. Once Al-Hakim Allah was beaten near death, he used his resurrection powers, and thereafter all things were created for his glory. Al-Hakim Allah's life expectations as king help you understand the dead gods formally, socially, and traditionally. David and Al-Hakim Allah were both willing to step up and become honorable and be led versus believing in various gods or objects. Many people worship objects as a god. Al-Hakim Allah's followers value the dead and living sacrifices that he made. The objects can't help people who are lost visualize why fruitful relationships make a difference. Because objects cannot give you spiritual direction and guidance from webs of destruction. Objects don't help to acknowledge living sacrifices over sinful sacrifices. Because an object can't acknowledge evil from righteousness, and an object can't tell you how to deal with an enemy that torments you daily. Simply put, an actual God who has shared our struggles is the only way to acknowledge living sacrifices. When you discredit creatures for creation, you discredit the first humans, which were Africans. God intends for humans to become creators, and he wouldn't use the derivation of animals to label mankind as ungodly. Biblical knowledge is a form of vows relating to generations of humanity. It is a promise to keep the commandments. It reveals how assurances in God can strengthen bonds of communication through love and faith, grace, and obedience. It was formed for ancient gods to control the population. All these were reasons why the Bible was written, and many more. Ancient gods wanted to look out for future generations' well-being, so we could avoid making the huge mistakes that they had made. Most women's fears of the world are cares of the heart. And once a woman doesn't acknowledge the inner spirit of a father living in her as a righteous sense of direction, she won't acknowledge God or put faith in him to be a witness of Al-Hakim Allah's experiences. When you continually engage in naughty girl roles with selfless pride, eventually, you will become too venomous and love it more than God as a father figure. His love came at a cost, and Playgirl's disbelief in his ministry today is risking the foundation on which it stands. Economic recessions generally involve a breakdown of disbelief in the government of judgment and justice, and it leaves more individuals dwelling in darkness, shadows of death. But typically, once a woman has no faith in a reward for doing good or punishment for doing evil, there is no reason to be human. They become willing to only express the evil that they have in their heart. And this proves their non-devotion to God. Preaching the gospel isn't the only way to glorify our Father in heaven. But you should not become a minister for God if you aren't willing to put aside differences with all of humankind. Al-Hakim Allah's knowledge as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit still live in many individuals today. You can look to him for direction and guidance, to form fruitful relationships around you. And you can become fruitful in every righteous good work while increasing knowledge through him. His ministry is to reach the lost, and this does involve man and womankind coming together to put aside their differences, and to give him the glory for creations. How does the Spirit work in your heart? The Spirit starts full of love, forming gentle, humble, and patient self-worth. It remains dominant with certain personality types. The Spirit mediates between the body's feelings and thoughts, and the purpose of a person's life plays a key role in how their thoughts are manifested. Whatever comes from the heart prompts an action. If it's a true strategy, it will reveal exalted feelings. If it's a false strategy, it will reveal depressive feelings. The exalted spirit forms high confidence, while the depressive spirit forms lower confidence. When people feel exalted, they become ambitious and brave. And when people feel depressed, they become cowardly or threatening. When you are confident, it reveals a reliable and trustworthy person, and they use righteous willpower to succeed. And when you lack confidence, it reveals an unreliable and untrustworthy person, and they use unrighteous willpower to succeed. Acknowledging the Spirit of God means wanting mercy over your life, although it is considered an idol to like or trust in God. Prideful individuals desire self-respect while being opinionated. So, avoid being opinionated unless you are getting paid to give opinions. 2 plans of action can be taken with the care of the heart. The transformation from false strategies to true strategies involves liking the direction in which it is headed. To like something, you need to know more about it. And to love something, you need to evaluate whether it's worth the attention and love. If you determine that it is worth the time, you submit to it, to evaluate better strategies and to become more exalted by it. And if you determine that it isn't worth the time, you depart from it and completely forget about it. Traditional sense of relationships. Initially, they are relationships that include a proposal, engagement, and then marriage vows. Traditions are passed down from generation to generation, and basically, they are common methods used for forming lifestyles that help form emotional bonds. Marriage is obsolete during the resurrection. As we consider the principles of the resurrection: 1. We will neither marry nor be given in marriage. 2. We must become worthy to obtain this status. 3. We will not die anymore. 4. We will become equal to the angels. 5. We will become the children of God. The word worthy is the Greek translation eligible definition suitable, worthy of, qualified, meeting the stipulated requirements, as to participate, compete, or work, qualified. The word obtain in the Greek translation acquire defines buy, purchase, obtain, and attain, to gain for oneself, through one's actions or efforts. It is like the word seek to refer to first the kingdom of God. The words equal in the Greek translation of identical definition, exactly alike, same, equal in every respect, interchangeable. Al-Hakim Allah would need angels to become like his image. As we consider the conditions of the resurrection: 1. You are to become dead to sin and your sinful nature. 2. You are to acknowledge the Scripture and the power of God. 3. You are not to give to others your flesh for the use of unrighteousness. 4. Sin should not have domination over your life. 5. You are under the law under grace. The word mortal is the Greek definition, a human being that is subject to death. The word lusts is the Greek definition sexual desire, strong desire, intense craving, to have an obsessive sexual desire. The word instruments is the Greek definition of financial securities, tools used for a specific kind of work. The word dominion is the Greek definition rule, sovereignty, mastery, or control. What is an eternal relationship? One can acknowledge who would make a great leader and can base success on God's standards. One can acknowledge one another's feelings daily while acknowledging love requires forgiveness and forgiving involves love. One enables fruitful concepts and helps fulfill a destiny with grace and truth. One is honorable where both can embrace politeness, while exercising faith with dignity and grace. One both can celebrate things overcome by acknowledging, living sacrifices made. One allows both to smile. One is manageable and doesn't fall apart with fear of struggles, where both can give God glory for all things. When you seek, you shall find it. Otherwise, you get an unfruitful relationship every time. The commitments of vows help strengthen bonds with God and the people. The commitments represent promises that bring assurance of love in faith, grace, and obedience. To ensure love in faith, grace with obedience, exercise righteous good works, and acknowledge how the Spirit of God works in and throughout your life with forgiveness. If you are in a relationship with the Heavenly Spirit of God, your relationship won't go on a bumpy ride, and your faith and works will be appreciated. Some driddles fully believe earthly people who have a love for fleshly desires cannot approach afterlife heaven though it doesn't exist. While no one has control over who goes to heaven or hell but God, it is possible to experience heaven on earth while claiming angel status. It doesn't mean a man and woman won't need to marry. Marriage is still respected in our society today, as a belief in a man's and woman's flesh joined together as one. To find a spouse live by the word of God, and for the spouse to remain an eternal mate, pray to God, asking Him to make the connection last a lifetime. It will give you something to look forward to, so you don't take the relationship for granted. Therefore, you can complete any mission He sends you on. Monogamous marriage. The origin of monogamous marriage is the bride of Allah and the Church, good love with truth. Women have an inward while men have an outwardly perspective of love. A man and woman unite inwardly joining as one. A man and woman can be purified, love cannot. God rebirths the beauty and elegance of a woman into a man to create qualities and refinement. Without a union, reformation, renewal of qualities and refinement, a woman becomes unaccountable of actions and behavior, impulsive and unorganized, and selfish to her own beliefs which are outward. When a woman unites with her qualities and refinements as a wife, she becomes accountable for actions and behavior, less impulsive and organized, humble and wise to her beliefs which is inward. Intercourse can be richer after a couple joins inwardly. Also, love and hurt can transfer deeper as a spiritual couple. Monogamous marriage is more favorable for a child's environment. It is more likely to remain a peaceful harmony. Only those who have spiritual love for marriage endure forever. God made woman a helpmeet for the Garden of Eden. This was Eve a suitable helper, companion, and worker. Genesis 2:18-25. In other terms, it refers to helpmate. Helpmeet aka worker is a meek woman with pure thoughts, not controlled by flesh. Her heart is cleansed free. She acknowledges whatever is put in the heart will come out. The heart, mind, and mouth are parts of the architect. These parts help bring forth fruits of the Spirit. They help design the call, direction, and structure God has for her. A helpmeet has beauty and elegance to empower her husband and others. All the good of her inner strength comes from her father, and her beauty and elegance come from her mother. A helpmeet woman acknowledges how to work with her husband by following and submitting. She acknowledges the art of doing so. She is a leader of women in her circle of friends. She acknowledges the art of doing so. She perceives becoming a helpmeet for her husband exercises her feminine side. She acknowledges natural foods are a must in their family structure. She will not allow her husband to wallow in the funk of depression. She acknowledges the difference between good and evil. For she is a peacemaker, not a vengeful person. Furthermore, she is thankful for everything in all the days of her life. She perceives the man is asking the woman, possibly her father and mother, for her hand in marriage. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Proverbs 31:10. Eventually, the new man and woman reign supreme. The man asking a woman for her hand in marriage is the old school way of marriage. It may be subject to change. What is love? A sacrificial action, and it involves risking everything to have it. Ordinarily, the person you are in love with, you show compassion to, so they can recognize mistakes, to have faith and patience throughout the marriage. You acknowledge their needs, though it may require doing extraordinary things to prove it isn't just an object. Engagement and then the wedding. An engagement is a promise before the wedding, the length of time between a marriage proposal and the marriage itself. According to a 2015 study, the average length of time for engagement is estimated to be 14.5 months. Otherwise, anywhere from 1 month to 2 years is reasonable, depending on what the goals and destinies consist of in a relationship. There is no right or wrong length of time for an engagement. Premarital education improves marriage for long-term strategies. One aspect of a marriage proposal is the engagement ring. It is given before the wedding to wear on the left hand. Usually, it is a gemstone set on a band. This is traditional in the wedding culture. A wedding ring is given during the wedding ceremony, and optimistically, the wedding ring is more elaborate than an engagement ring. At this time, the engagement ring is worn on the right hand and eventually put back on the left hand with the wedding ring stacked after the wedding ceremony. The circular shape of a ring represents eternity and infinity. The hole through the ring signifies a doorway leading to events in the future. Giving a ring to someone indicates a commitment to eternal and immortal love. It is best to buy from a jeweler who sells the engagement and wedding ring as a set to get the same styles. Various bridal wedding band types of metals include gold, platinum, or silver. Fortunately, diamonds are a girl's best friend, and sometimes man's wedding bands can include diamonds or jewels. It is wise to stay within a budget for buying wedding bands, planning ceremonies, and bachelor and bachelorette parties, especially if you are choosing not to accept premarital education of any kind. Expectations of a heavenly marriage. The sole purpose for joining a man and woman's souls together for marriage is to have a lifetime companion who shares the gift of love. In Genesis 3:16, God established a man to rule over the woman, as his wife. When a man and woman leave their father and mother, they are joined together as one flesh. It is appropriate for marriages to be officially divined by a minister. The contract makes wedding vows a promising love for the public to keep. Marriages based on the church are celebrated through God's love with good fellowship. Witnesses accept and confirm the union covenant while it is being established. After that, married couples rejoice and be merry. A heavenly marriage is more than knowing who's to be joined together, who will buy rings, or who will want a divorce for not believing a marriage can work. A heavenly marriage is also more than revealing an outward affair or love for a spouse. It is a harmony unique and worthy of seeking. It forms humble admiration for honorable pleasures. although it means obeying and paying attention to details of the responsibilities of married life while working together for a long-term marriage, along with complementing one another daily, valuing interpersonal beliefs, opinions, and testimonies. It too means hearing your partner without first forming judgment while having your spouse's best interests at heart. It too means performing righteous good works, forms natural heavenly fragrances in the air of a home environment while absorbing and nourishing one another's feelings and emotions daily. It too means being sensitive to a spouse's love and touch while believing exquisite and extraordinary things can happen in a spiritual marriage formed through two real people. It too means exploring the true nature of protection from the outer limits of bodily harm. Diversity in a marriage doesn't mean giving in to polygamous roles. This is taking steps backward. Polygamous roles have been going on since the beginning of time. And getting married doesn't mean waiting for an afterlife to experience eternal life. It means hearts being open to heaven on earth. Only kind words and wisdom of law should come out of either the woman or man's mouth. Both should fear the Father. All these things while acknowledging righteous responses to impulses and remaining true to events in your current life. Eventually, the new man and woman reign supreme. Today the man as a leader and the woman as a helpmate have two major responsibilities to provide financial support and love. This too means a woman pays the tab when she asks him out on a date. The man and woman must be submissive while honoring and respecting one another daily. Both must notice and prefer one another exceedingly and show love and kindness toward one another daily. Once they do have kids, both are to take care of them by providing financial support, leadership, and love. A marriage gives rights to have children who will be given an inheritance from goods that are made lawful. Thereafter either should tell the other, I believe in you, I thank you for loving me and the children the way you do. When you marry you get more support from family, friends, and the community. Women need to acknowledge being the weaker vessel and let men dominate in marriages. Though women show anger and bitter emotions more than sensitive ones, they must show compassion toward their husbands daily. This is to impact the relationship for a long-term marriage. Without seeking correction, a man tends to lack confidence he can become a better man, and condemning him is only for the corrector above. Couples can overcome challenges together. You don't need to call one another out on every issue. Fix issues together, other issues just let them go. Married couples thereafter love each other in body and spirit inwardly throughout eternity. Below has been translated, strong and weaker vessel. The husbandman is to dwell with his wife according to knowledge, giving her honor. She is to be a weaker vessel, incorruptible in the sight of God at a good price. The man's manner is renewed with the grace of life to a meek and quiet spirit, a hidden man of the heart, not outwardly troubled with fear. Wives are to be subject to their husbands, either will be coupled with fear, and both shouldn't hinder prayers. Excessiveness can result in evilness including drinking, drugs, eating, lusting, sex, and violence. Men tend to forget what a weaker vessel consists of. They go into marriage as strong vessels, and once they can't or won't change all evil ways, they become weak vessels to remain in the marriage. Mainly they do everything outwardly, which results in being troubled with fear outside of a marriage rather than being coupled with fear within a marriage to allow the wife's guidance to work effectively. Being open to the public's eyes, there is no limit on how far an extent or intent will go. When a man does things inwardly, he doesn't expose his extent and intent before the public. He acknowledges changing all his evil ways to become a stronger vessel. Marriage relationship. A long-term relationship ought to be built on the spiritual marriage according to the church, formally, socially, and traditionally. This is to form rational concepts that are well thought out and to value each other's strengths for heavenly and eternal things, and to find comfort in one another while measuring righteous acceptability, accountability, possibilities, and responsibilities, while repairing debt obligations and other relationships that are of great importance. Support one another, and don't make hasty decisions without confirming mutual agreements. Married couples are to exercise patience during long sufferings and continually keep a loving, joyful, and peaceful environment. Give to a charity in time of need, but not with your last. And most importantly, respect others' privacy and people of authority. Growing in a marriage. Couples who marry focus on continual married love. Eternity is in the one love that has joined together. Continual love in the husband and wife along with wisdom endures forever. During the growth process, couples enter the blessings of marriage stages, it's stored in their souls. Though the joining of souls and minds together means they are no longer two but one flesh. The bond helps grow a friendship with love. Friendship before love meditates between the engagements and vows to form steadfast love. Steadfast love creates married love, and that love creates friendship. A husband or wife ought not to perceive anyone more desirable than the other. This includes to feel, hear, smell, or touch. Some people will want to see the marriage fail, however. It takes educational and spiritual knowledge to make wise choices, and involuntary fears can hinder growth. Try not to harbor other people's fears of your marriage. Growing in faith doesn't mean giving your spouse a list of demands before you are willing to do right by the both of you. Getting married doesn't mean looking for reasons to get a divorce. The Bible teaches there will be sufferings and trial tests, and once you acknowledge overcoming the suffering of trial test diminishes. A lot of people experience love warfare in various ways, so it is very common to come into marriage looking for reasons to dismiss a worthy potential eternal mate. Most reasons for breakups are insignificant to valuing an eternal mate. But anger convinces you to give in to destruction and violence rather than keep the peace when you are not acknowledging God's signs and wonders. Look for growth in the marriage rather than finding ways to shrink the growth on any given basis. You ought to have faith in doing exquisite and extraordinary things for growth in the marriage, to enable rewards at the end of sufferings and trials. However, neither is supposed to choose when the end is near. This is one major reason you can't bring baggage into a marriage. You must be open to long-term relationship building, to enable greater possibilities to take place. If you come to a marriage unable to invest all, you're already in agreement to create love warfare. Marriage is to be built on God's love, to be able to let your guard down when it is your turn to lead. Whoever leads, lead fiercely and righteously. Once both are in a habit of going when times are tough, it is like standing in the easy yoke with Allah. Reasons to value good leadership in a marriage. A stay-at-home parent or person who has less leadership character would value good leadership qualities. If a person is blind or disabled, they too would value the other person's leadership. A person with good leadership character acknowledges how both in the relationship can develop to higher quality standards. Mainly they are loyal in responding to the right opportunities and have longevity in the call of their direction. They believe education and obedience pay off. Also, they execute current results, to not remain in poverty for the rest of their earthly lives. They acknowledge the difference between a miracle-working person versus a people-pleasing person, and can spot a fruitful person from an evil person, all while acknowledging legendary influences. What is my duty in a marriage? Acknowledge how both can transform into righteous people, to avoid both developing habitual habits. Trust and obey the will of God. It will allow you to trust and obey your partner. Always have mercy on them. Standard behavior in relationships means everything when you have influential people influencing your life daily. Stay-home parent responsibilities. Generally, they are to teach them to be a loving and kind person toward others, to ensure the children are getting a great quality of education and following instructions in school, contribute support toward their educational activities. It is wise to teach them everything they are to know for the following grade ahead of time. Embrace the children's achievements and communication skills by helping them with their homework. Help them to research educational topics for the current grade, to allow them to be knowledgeable. Educational academics, athletic, classroom, or course of study work that includes homework requirements for activities, development, materials, practice, projects, research, etc. Buying books for them or taking them to the local library to read will execute current results. Encourage growth and development for nutritional guidance by making sure they're eating natural foods. Set goals, keep them and remain focused. What does having supportive parents mean for kids? Once a man doesn't want anything to do with one or more of his biological children, it is classified as a form of abandonment, just as it is for a woman. When parents accept their biological children and give them guidance and support, they don't have to seek love from outside adults or school teachers. It is when parents take time to give them a sense of respect toward authority, they can feel comfort, compassion, empowerment, happiness, hope, joy, love, and peace toward their parents. It would also allow them to value embracing inner strength and allow them to be accountable for actions with self-awareness. They too can value effortless behavior, something you can't buy nor replace. All this would help them acknowledge the Father's Spirit living in them, something needed to believe in God. Avoid taking your husband for granted. Wives today infringe entitlements upon husbands. This is a rising issue that is leading to divorce. Either they selfishly spend their husband's money exclusively for their use, or think a man should work without holidays, all while she becomes unconcerned about his health. Sometimes he may come home after work and perform housekeeping duties even though she may be either sitting at home with the kids or working a job where she sits down all day. Wives, avoid passing obsessions with stuff onto your kids, and show appreciation and gratitude for the chores he does around the house if you can get him to do them. It isn't about how much you can get him to do, and you don't need to act like it is his job. If you aren't willing to give him credit for being considerate and thoughtful, you may create love warfare once you don't acknowledge when to stop. If you do not want him to show an act of kindness by performing chores, then he probably won't do them anyway. Otherwise, specifically, praise or thank him for the various things he does, and not just the chores. Get charming and expressive with the thanks by not needing to say thanks every time, and even thank you notes are worth the time. Also, don't wait until he has to work extra hours to write thank you notes. It might only become a slap in the face. And don't be indecisive by only thanking him at home. Praise and thank him in public too. Sympathetically, it shows signs of abusiveness to physically or verbally discipline your husband in public just as it does a child. If he fails at something, don't chew his head off, making him feel his time was wasted. Most importantly, celebrate his accomplishments and successes to avoid annoying him with failures. Praise him for being a part of your accomplishments and success, and acknowledge your failures as something can be overcome. Allow him off-day holidays and relaxation time, and then let him spend his time completing assignments he plans to work on. All this will allow him to reward you at the end of suffering and trials. Submitting with manipulation in a marriage. Manipulation is a process of handling, influencing, managing, or treating unfairly. The manipulator tries to change circumstances or outcomes to suit one's advantage, agenda, position, or purpose. It is commonly expressed in many affairs and matters dear to the heart, but the behavior isn't angelic. Couples that manipulate one another influence each other's wise decisions, especially the ones that form disagreements. But couples that learn how to submit, show submissiveness in everything they do and say. This is how marriages last 50 years or longer. It is an agreement between both in a marriage to submit. Marriages who don't acknowledge the submissive attitude are the ones having huge conflicts about things of no significant value. To abide by faith in a marriage will require practice. You can't forget a submissive attitude and expect to remain in a marriage without working things out, and you can't lay blame every time you fail at keeping promises. The submissive attitude leaves space for error and acknowledges everything is not always going to be perfect. Couples must form mutual agreements that will last throughout trial tests, and sympathetically, you don't need to manipulate one another, only submit to one another. Just as faith shines the light so you can be able to see God in spirit, the same thing applies in marriage. Faith in God will give you rest in the soul. The same thing applies in marriage. You have to come back to believing in a God to find peace. The same thing applies to marriage. Having said your beliefs, faith and light shine for the spouse to receive peace and rest in the spirit of the marriage. Reuniting after marriage. Remarriage takes place after a divorce or death of a spouse. Remaining married and remarrying provides mental and physical health benefits. Though the single life has fewer mental and physical health benefits, generally singles are more susceptible to continual usage of alcohol and drugs than married couples. While alcohol and drug usage can lead to divorce, most times it leads to not getting married at all. Marriage after death of a spouse. Widows are judged more critically than other women entering a marriage. However, there is no length of time to wait, other than waiting on another eternal mate. Sometimes it takes a little while to get over the death of a spouse. This happens when you want to remain loyal to them. They may be still dear to the heart, and you would rather continue honoring and respecting their concerns. The ex-spouse will always have a place in your heart. It is wise to acknowledge the loyalty you expressed while they were living. And after that, you don't have to feel you have let them down once you do move on. When you are open to the cares of the world again and challenges, it will happen. At that time, you will be excited about experiencing appropriate feelings that will expand to love for the new marriage partner. It is then the new partner will be worth the determination, effort, and time that too will require patience. Untraditional senses of relationships. They are relationships that don't include an engagement or proposal, of which the methods are classified as unfavorable or untraditional. Unfavorable means the methods didn't form healthy emotional bonds and may have been destructive. Untraditional means the methods weren't passed down from the prior generation, or they are dishonorable or new. Why aren't some women committing? Too many men are being taken advantage of at an early age, and men rarely get to tell their stories. As a result, too many men are pulling trains on young ladies, avoiding the opportunity of getting to know the young ladies on a personal and spiritual level. Too many men are abandoning their women after having created a child inside of them, or thereafter the baby is born. And those men tend to perceive being a father as a stolen choice instead of an asset or privilege. Often this behavior is to avoid any obligations of taking care of the child, and this form of abandonment has been on the rise. There are 3 spiritual characters that fewer women embody after that being caring, fruitful, and loving before intimacy with the eternal mate. Women who are taught their self-worth are to be formed with ethical values acknowledge those characteristics. But women who are taken advantage of aren't taught their self-worth means more to embody an angelic personification through ethical values. These are major reasons why women lack respect for father figures in men. Becoming an angel does require effort, and without those 3 characters, love wars can become the alternative. Yet the inward man is renewed day by day. Why do couples become impatient before marriage? They may be unwilling to engage in face-to-face matters as a leader or team player, by being visualized as a couple, respected as a couple, taking a stand as a couple, and believing as a couple. All can hinder growth, and to stand as a couple, you ought to know what you stand for first as an individual. Communication skills, core values, family values, and stressful situations such as child support, paying bills, or repaying debt obligations are responsibilities that come with being an adult. When either in the relationship hinders, prayers holding in those suppressed emotions can create chaos. And when couples avoid commitment, the relationship can go for a bumpy ride. A partner may cause violence for aggressive sexual tendencies, alcohol, drugs, or even validation of being right. Although vows state till until death do you part and for better or worse, it seems many couples are agreeing to the worst part when either partner doesn't allow the other partner to excel in life. Or couples are agreeing to the death part when either partner kills the other partner for another lover or an insurance policy. Some people in upscale communities believe it is easier to explain the death of a spouse than divorce. These are selfish expressions and criminally insane thoughts, but not enough couples are taking it all in from the beginning or leaving room for error. Self-destruction or denial. It is the voluntary destruction of something by itself, a counterproductive and self-defeating habit formation, of which a person denies oneself happiness but instead causes pain, deliberately or inadvertently. Self-destruction is an umbrella term for a variety of self-damaging patterns, from doing things that lead to failure, habitual tendencies, or even recklessness. As with the opposite trait of greed, self-destruction represents dysfunction in a person's fundamental relationship with life. A person with greed fears that something vital is lacking or missing from life, therefore they constantly desire to have more. A person with self-destruction, in contrast, feels that something fundamentally bad or toxic is consuming their life, and desires to keep this under strict control. And an anxious young person may feel there is something about them that attracts, deserves, or provokes this type of treatment, and why else would such things happen? In relationships, they may even develop the same thoughts, of why they keep attracting the same types of people. Those are expressions of one or more traumatic experiences. With self-denial there is a splitting of the personality that feels this thing in me is to be ignored and suppressed by any means possible, and to whatever cost. The person feels that their very being must be kept under strict control. The urge to self-destruct doesn't necessarily involve literal or physical behavior. Self-destructive behaviors can be acute, mild, or severe. Widespread forms of self-destructive behaviors can include alcohol abuse, compulsive gambling, drug abuse, eating disorders, or even sexual addiction. How can playgirls change the self-destruct? Playgirls must allow God to be the leader in every part of their life. To overcome obstacles, this includes the heart, mind, and soul. God appoints those seeking the atonement for their sins, to enjoy His salvation, not to endure His wrath. They must acknowledge the webs of destruction they place on others with a rebellious and sinful nature. They don't have to feel a sense of submission to others, without applying the entire biblical knowledge in their lives. The privilege of submission comes with a responsibility to remain fruitful to God and in a relationship. No one wants to be surrounded by destruction and violence. If playgirls want to have a man become the first fruit in their life, they ought to acknowledge a change of heart about God, themselves, and the higher righteousness is needed. Why do playgirls get perceived as spiritually bankrupt? With playgirls embodying naughty girl roles with selfless pride, they are not using their willpower to become righteous. It appears they are serving this behavior. Whatever you serve is where your heart manifests. When you are spiritually bankrupt, you will serve anything. Embodying spirituality requires growth and effort, and it is a free will choice to trust in God. Why is the right man or woman not justified as being genuine? Ordinarily, most seekers think they will find the right person. But once the right person surfaces, then you rationalize about their existence in your life. Either they have different core values, religious beliefs, or family traditions, of which can result in the other partner showing less compassion and enthusiasm. It can be difficult in a relationship when a partner isn't as passionate about matters dear to the heart and avoids being genuine. In a relationship, sharing opinions is a common denominator of beliefs and values, especially when it means everything, because experiencing each other's culture can help develop common or similar beliefs and values that a couple can take a stand for. Sharing requires putting the unlikable differences together to compare notes and thereafter measuring the success by God's standards. But generally, we desire validation from strangers first. When these are individuals we don't know. If this is the case, before things go wrong, take a step back to acknowledge the misunderstandings. In a marriage, getting outside validation doesn't leave much room for politeness or submission, and you must be genuine with yourself to value clear advice rather than validation. Formally, it is best to join a church community with individuals who can give you clear advice. When you don't value a righteous sinner's clear advice, you will value an unrighteous sinner's validation for the cares of the heart. Also, needing to feel justified about personal beliefs, opinions, or values in a church community can lead to a false hope of God's expectations. Why couples are fearful of delegating as a couple on social networks. Many are unwilling to measure their relationship with God's standards. The traditional sense of relationships represents vows with God and vows with others. The untraditional sense of relationships represents the failure, habitual tendencies, and recklessness of man and womankind. If you deliberately choose to influence others through the untraditional sense of relationships, keep in mind this is consistent with doing things in vain, which means you represent and vow to nothing. With core values being distorted by social trends, most couples' emotions are up in the air, and literally, some couples' lives are put on hold waiting for social views to change to new perspectives. Relationships in religious colleges and universities. The success rate of marriages is higher than in public colleges and universities, yet still, there are players and playgirls on the down low. Players at religious colleges may take advantage of a woman, just like any other college or university, but it doesn't happen as often. While attending a Southern church, here in Oklahoma, that had a religious school organization, I noticed some women had been forced to attend the religious school, after already becoming a stripper or whore, which meant they had already slept with several men. This didn't stop the women from finding a husbandman, however. Some students were leaving the religious school without an eternal mate, both males and females. Some students didn't marry the first person they dated. Often it took them dating 2 to 3 individuals before finding an eternal mate. Formally they married, then the female got pregnant, or informally the female got pregnant and then they married. The age group this refers to ranges from 18 to 21. Also, I noticed that once a student had turned 21, if they hadn't married an eternal mate, finding one there almost became virtually impossible. Either they had past circumstances that held them back or were unable to connect, due to a parent abandoning them at an early age. And if the active parent made negative choices, those circumstances too became deciding factors, just as it is in public colleges and universities. This means they too aren't necessarily thinking of a permanent relationship with the first or second person they date. In general, religious women will do what other women won't do after getting pregnant. They will accept the father's hand in marriage. Otherwise, the young woman may be forced to leave the religious school if the man doesn't marry her. Religious schools have been able to keep the negative actions and behavior of students out of the public's view, because religious organizations don't support any type of vainness. All this is happening all over America. None is perfect, no, not one. Relationship roles approaches. Traditional: the man supports the family, and the woman's time and focus are spent keeping the house. Both partners spend the same amount of time and energy working, and the income earned by the man is shared and used for the needs of everyone in the household. Cons: the man can withhold finances for maintaining bills for the house, or the man can earn very little wages, and all needs aren't met, or the man can spend the finances recklessly on things such as alcohol and drugs, etc., or the woman feels her more ambitious talents aren't being used. One partner rarely gets to share their emotions, and feelings of being left out linger. Otherwise, things can run smoothly. Egalitarian: both men and women work to support the family, and they share the household and parenting duties 50-50. Cons: one partner rarely gets to share their emotions, and feelings of being left out linger. Otherwise, things can run smoothly. Nebulous. It is unclear whether the man or woman works to support the family because the family's attitude about gender roles constantly changes. And so, it is unclear who will support the family, or who will do household and parenting duties. Cons. No one supports the family, and no one does household and parenting duties. Both partners share their emotions, and feelings of being left out still linger, of which abuse and neglect are visible. Here, it doesn't matter whether the man or woman is the breadwinner or homemaker, everything is on a sliding scale based on the attitudes of the two partners. And the lack of consciousness and sense of right principles can lead to resentment and strife. Undefined femininity. Often gender roles involve strengths and weaknesses that are attributed to behavior, Christian core values, equality, expectations, personality, personal core values, social identity, social scripts, responsibilities, reputation, respect, rights, etc. Gender roles are used to refer to traditional model roles such as manliness and womanish charm, beautiful and handsome, etc. Whereas the man worked outside the house to earn money to support the family, the woman cleaned and took care of the kids, for the house to run smoothly. Nowadays there are three relationship approaches such as traditional, egalitarian, and nebulous. According to recent studies, traditional and egalitarian gender role approaches seem to satisfy most couples who live very structured lives, and the nebulous approach seems to be stressful for one or both partners. Rebellious youth believe since there are three relationship options, they don't have to follow the traditional model, nor do I have to respect my father or mother in my appearance and behavior. This generation is changing the way you perceive femininity or masculinity through conditions of gender roles. Now feminine doesn't just mean respect me, I'm a woman, it means I want to express the new essence of femininity without giving up all my traditional gender roles. Some women acknowledge being a high-maintenance female, without acknowledging it means embodying femininity. It still involves feeling beautiful, dressing like a female, and walking feminine. Still, a feminine woman is gentle and sensitive. They use their womanish charm rather than cowardice, indecisiveness, and evasiveness. And still, the feminine woman acts like a lady. Conclusion. While some people value the change of traditional gender roles, to share household and work duties and obligations, other people rebel against the traditional sense of relationships to meditate on alcohol, drugs, or sex to avoid facing fears. And after a while, it becomes too difficult to visualize themselves in natural light. You won't change what you won't acknowledge. Just using the quote, "Let the chips fall where they may," doesn't show guidance and support as an adult when you do have kids. It is possible to share gender roles without abandoning all traditional roles, and it is possible to plan strategies by making strategic moves while facing fears. We develop our relationship expectations based on earning potential, logistics, personal values, and personality. Also, our upbringing, location, religion, and social circle all play a role in defining how gender and tradition will factor into our home and professional lives. Statistics showed in the U.S. women filed for divorce 80% more than men. In 2014 there were an estimated 813,862 divorces and marriages 2,140,272. And in 2013 there were an estimated 832,157 divorces and marriages 2,081,301. Though people getting a divorce aren't the same ones getting married, therefore, calculating percentage rates during a given year continues to be inaccurate. Not all states report divorce rates. The divorce count is based on the total population, not the total married population. The average marriage lasts in the U.S. for about 8 years or less. Before 2001, statistics showed economic downs prompted some couples to remain together. Furthermore, divorce and marriage rates were lower with economic downs. In the South, younger couples marry for the first time, due to the average lower household income, and there was no competition. In America, divorce rates were lower in blue states and higher in red states, and it came down to family values in blue states. Statistics showed states that had more Catholics and Lutherans were the states with lower divorce rates, which were Midwest and Northeastern states. Also, states where there are fewer Roman Catholics, younger couples marry more. People who had been married before were more likely to get a divorce. Couples who have been married 35 years or more are less likely not to get a divorce. The common domestic disputes were chores, in-laws, quality time, sex, and money. Couples were at an increased risk of divorce who disagreed over money. Statistics showed highly educated people marry at a later age while living with a partner unmarried. Statistics also showed 2014 in the US there were 107 million unmarried people ages 18 and older. Unmarried people included those who were divorced, never married, or widowed. The never married groupings made up 63%, divorced 24%, and widowed 13%. Of this statistic, women made up 53% and men 47%. The failed marriages and relationships made up the landscape of single women raising fatherless children. And divorce wasn't the overall reason more kids were suffering in calamity. Lack of educational and negative behavior played major factors resulting in homelessness, incarceration, juvenile delinquency, rapes, runaways, substance abuse, and teen pregnancy. Divorcees Deuteronomy 24:1-4 says, when a man hath taken a wife, and marry her, and it comes to pass that she finds no favor in his eyes because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. It says she can marry another man. If he divorces her, the former husband cannot marry her again. She is defiled. When a woman is willing to give a man a divorce, she is admitting to being defiled, and the unwillingness to change the defilement to remain in the marriage. With man being the first fruits of a marriage, this gives him the ability to acknowledge judging righteous judgment when it comes to a woman's defilement during a marriage. The man's observation of his woman's actions and behavior is usually spot on, and whether she is willing to remain defiled after the divorce. This is one major reason divorce rates are on the rise, and why more people, in general, are defiled. After the couple marries, either one or both may cheat outside the marriage, increasing the STD's probability, but in a marriage, you must seek help to rid of STDs. Because this too plays a factor. There are two ways to be free of cancers and diseases without reoccurring hospital visits: by increasing natural foods and herbal infection formula intake. Both partners often carry baggage into marriage, some of which include past suppressed emotions and thoughts. Sometimes either partner just needs an ear for listening without judging. When both have virtually given up on a united outcome because neither was heard throughout the marriage. Men and women both have gotten cold-hearted these days, and it probably is due to upbringing or reoccurring stress. But typically, everything on the planet moves like a worrying type of creature. Divorce men, women, and children can heal, and divorce affects innocent children more than anyone. And I do believe God had the children in mind, to handle with care even though the wounds are unbearable. The goal of co-parenting is to make sure the kids' needs are met. Women often protect their kids during co-parenting, but it can overshadow the abuse, drugs, and violence of others. Protecting them from their father isn't always a suitable option. Justified in masturbation. To justify is to show an action, claim, statement, etc., an excuse or reason for something done. It can mean as a debit for bail to justify as certainty. It can also mean self-assurance for the lack thereof to justify being right about something. A need to feel justified happens during long periods of abuse, abandonment, or neglect. 1 out of 3 people in the world suffers from justification assurance or certainty naturally starting from newborn stages. It is not immoral to feel emptiness, but to feel justified can sometimes involve a lack of true discernment when endangering or hindering others. And to masturbate is the stimulation of one's genitals generally for a sexual orgasm or self-gratification. With masturbation justifications, neither self-assurance of being right nor self-gratification of being sexually satisfied creates a supportive foundation for a long-term marriage. Either creates empty discernment, feelings, and emotions for what is self-righteous. You cannot show concern for others suffering through calamity while valuing self-gratification of sexual desires excessively. Although this is only one major way many people pretend to be justified, it is a short-term satisfaction while marriage is a long-term benefit. Various levels of infidelity. 01. A parent pressuring a child to play the spouse role. 02. Emailing a lover or soon-to-be lover. 03. Emotionally occupied with a former partner. 04. Fantasizing about someone else other than a spouse. 05. Fondling someone other than a spouse. 06. Having sex or kissing someone other than a spouse. 07. Intimacy without physical contact. 08. Making out with someone other than a spouse. 09. Masturbation to an image of another. 10. Meeting up with a lover or soon-to-be lover. 11. Phone sex. 12. Sending nude videos. 13. Text message sex. If your partner doesn't conform to certain lustful desires, you don't hold grudges against them. And you don't go ruining your partner's life when they don't oblige to your list of demands. Anger and bitterness over miscommunications aren't reasons to form new ones. Relationships aren't objects of lustful desires. There are concepts of commitments that must be honored with righteous judgment on either side. And without honoring them righteously, they tend to fall apart. Although these are forms of infidelity, it isn't necessary to take action against your partner. You ought to keep an open mind about the other person's fears and struggles. Often the fear of struggles are lines that ought not to be crossed, and this is when you proceed with caution. Understand their needs and don't let your emotions get in the way before confronting them. Think logically throughout any verbal conversation, as you consider your and your partner's health and needs, and then determine the consequence of circumstances. Remember, no one is perfect. In most marriages that last 50 years or longer, a spouse has cheated but the couple was forgiving above anything else. And it is possible to forgive the partner 70 times 70. Otherwise, if you aren't a forgiving person, you ought not to marry anyone. It will only lead to a divorce. Ultimately, it is best to get to know a person before hopping into bed with them. Remember, it isn't all about you. It is about making the relationship last. Men, women, and respect is admiring someone or something deeply because of their abilities, qualities, or achievements. Respect refers to the feelings, rights, traditions, or wishes of others. Respect also means respecting a particular aspect, detail, or point. Either definition means to show esteem towards someone or something that you appreciate. When you appreciate their abilities, qualities, or achievements, you are recognizing their self-worth. But to appreciate others, you also must recognize and respect your self-worth. All humans have rights and responsibilities, positive or negative, to respect the feelings, traditions, and wishes of others. These are contemporary and modern-day concepts that were established so man and womankind can balance between the extremes of heaven and hell. Having said that, men and women are of equal value, and this should be acknowledged everywhere. Bottom line, when you have a man who meets at least 3 of the requirements on your checklist, accept his proposal for marriage once he does prove that he is worth the effort and time. And be patient with him throughout trial tests. Don't just string him along, because you won't necessarily find a man that meets all requirements on the checklist. Core values. The term core value aligns beliefs, morals, principles, responsibility, respect, self-learning, sense of hope and urgency, etc. Core values are our emotional GPS. Each business and individual has important and true value, and the combinations are never duplicated. In business, it is a principle that guides an organization's internal conduct as well as its relationship with the external world. Also, core values help companies determine if they are on the right path to fulfilling their goals by creating an unwavering guide. Values are summarized in the mission statement or a statement of core values. Core values are the genuine importance of happiness, health, and well-being. A few common values that drive human beings are accomplishments, family, freedom, integrity, justice, and safety. Your life will feel off if you ignore the value. Whereas you may experience negative feelings such as a feeling of discontentment, out of sorts, or loss of energy. Even unjustified anger can pop up to work against you. Everything will get right once you honor and recognize your self-value. Only you can articulate those that define your true self, and there are no right or wrong values to hold. Defining, honoring, and using our values is about giving ourselves choices and opportunities to feel good about life and ourselves. We find peace by honoring our own and respecting those held by others. Core values list: authenticity, achievement, adventure, authority, autonomy, balance, beauty, boldness, compassion, challenge, citizenship, community, competency, contribution, creativity, curiosity, determination, fairness, faith, fame, friendships, fun, growth, happiness, honesty, humor, influence, inner harmony, justice, kindness, knowledge, leadership, learning, love, loyalty, meaningful work, openness, optimism, peace, pleasure, poise, popularity, recognition, religion, reputation, respect, responsibility, security, self-respect, service, spirituality, stability, success, status, trustworthiness, wealth, wisdom. Christian core values: Allah, discipleship, holiness, love, power, prayer, truth. Al-Hakim: Allah had disciples as followers during his life, and they were the 12 apostles. Nowadays, a disciple is a follower or student of a leader, philosopher, or teacher. Discipleship is the process by which disciples grow through Allah, as the Father and Holy Spirit, in which we adore and love Him with our actions, behavior, thoughts, and whole hearts. The process involves devotion, obedience, prayer, purification, and testimony to be all alike. Holiness is the state of being holy, according to a doctrine or religion. It is the purification or sanctification of a believer that is baptized, cleansed, and refined through Allah and the Bible. Power is the ability to act or do something in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality. It is an authority or right that is delegated or given to a body of people or persons. 2. It is the ability or capacity to direct or influence the behavior of events or others. Prayer is a solemn request for expression or help of thanks that is addressed to God or an object of worship. It is a religious service, especially a regular one, at which people gather to pray together. 2. It is an earnest hope or wish. Truth is the quality or state of being true, truthful, and trustworthy. Christian fundamental social values. Faith, grace, hope. Love, service, peace. Faith is complete confidence or trust in someone or something that mirrors the vows of commitments God has for His people. It is a strong belief in God, or a doctrine of religion based on spirituality rather than physical proof. Also, it is a strongly held belief or theory. Grace is simple elegance or refinement of movement. It is courteous goodwill. It is giving credit or honor to someone or something by one's presence. 2. It is an official period allowed for payment of the sum, which is due for compliance with condition or law, especially an extended period granted as a special favor. God's grace comes before our faith, and to reconcile mankind to Himself is the grace that comes before our faith. Also, grace comes before good works. Hope is a feeling of desire and expectation for a certain thing to happen. It is a feeling of trust. 2. It is when you want something to happen or be the case. Love is an intense feeling of deep affection. It is a person or thing that one loves and takes great interest and pleasure in. 2. It is something or someone that you like or enjoy very much. Service is the action of helping or doing work for someone. It is a system that supplies a public need such as communications, transportation, or utility. It is a ceremony of religious worship according to the prescribed form for such ceremony. 2. It is a perform routine maintenance or repair work. Peace is freedom from disturbance and tranquility. It is a period or state in which there is no war, and the war has ended. 2. It is a ceremonial handshake exchange during a service in a church. Personal core values. Commitment, compassion, consistency. Courage, creativity, dependability. Education, efficiency, environmentalism. Fitness, good humor, honesty. Innovation, loyalty, motivation. Open-mindedness, optimism, passion. Patriotism, perseverance, positivity. Reliability, respect, service to others. Spirit of adventure. Ethics or moral philosophy. Either is a branch of philosophy that systematizes concepts of right and wrong conduct. Of the systematic concepts, the field of aesthetics and ethics are used to determine the validity of value, to comprise the branch of philosophy called axiology. Ethics is a disciplinary term that identifies just and unjust practices about moral duty. The standards uphold obligations to prevent and stop crime, and the system addresses human morality. Human morality is the consciousness and sense of right principles that define life's operative dynamics. When a human being ignores the moral demands and responsibility of life, it implies such has fallen below the human profile with existing as a whole. This will affect the individual negatively in all areas. And since human morality defines life's operative dynamics, your consciousness and sense data stores of right principles determine your core, personal, or self-value. 3 areas of study within ethics: applied ethics, concerning what a person is obligated, or permitted, to do in a specific situation or a particular domain of action. Metaethics, concerning the theoretical meaning and reference of moral propositions, and how their truth values, if any, can be determined. Normative ethics, concerning the practical means of determining a moral course of action. Definition. Aesthetics, a set of principles concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty, especially in art. Just, based on our behavior according to what is morally fair and right. Unjust, not based on or behaving according to what is morally fair or right. Morality, principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. The fundamental differences between ethics and value. Ethics is a system of moral principles for conduct that addresses morality and helps to determine what is morally correct or incorrect in given situations. The value defines ideals and principles, which help us to make decisions about what is important in our lives. Values are the stimuli of our thinking and influence the emotional state of mind by acting as a motivator. Ethics are consistent, and values are different for each person, because what is important for one person may not be important for another person. Conclusion. While ethics are consistently applied over time and remain the same for all human beings, values have an individualistic approach and remain stable, relatively unchanging. but can be changed over time due to an emotional event.